watch the chat.
Oh, wait, we're live. Here we are. Okay. What is up, everyone? Don't worry. We don't worry about anything here. We have our guest for the PokerNews Podcast today. And for those of you who are listening, we've already introduced her. But for those who are just joining here on the Hangout Live, we're just going to give you a little taster. Kristy is just an amazing person. In fact, probably my bestest friend. So this is going to be a super fun one for me, especially. But for those who don't know, Kristy was a producer and presenter on PokerNews. She also hosted several podcasts, both strategy and also Poker News related. And now she is the host of her very own podcast, WTF Am I Doing with My Life, which we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk actually about how to use some of the tools that Kristy's been learning in of poker and some emotional intelligence and risk taking and all these things, how you can utilize those in your poker life and just your real life. So welcome to the show, Kristy.
Thank you. Wow. This is bringing me back to our pretty broad days when we used to podcast it up and do Miley twerk videos. And
I was literally just having brunch with Lynn this weekend, and we were talking a little pretty broad action. And I was like, man, you know, what I miss the most is just having a first weekly date with you.
Yeah, totally. And we made some rules, which I think we should reshare here. 1, don't eat bananas in public. And 2, free the nipple. Always. Feel free.
I mean, these are the most important things that we learned from our years of streaming together. Kind of fix, like, my face is exploding. It's so bright on this camera and I'm trying to fix it. But I think there's just too much going on to worry about it. Obviously, I didn't worry too much about what I looked like. I'll work on that in 2018. But let's get ready, girl.
Amazing. So, I love your sweater. Your Christmas sweater.
Christmas onesie. Thank you. It's just for those who need to know, it is actually a onesie. All right, so let's get into it though. Let's talk a little bit just to bring people back in who may still remember you as the Kristy Arnett of Poker News many years ago. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, we've talked before sort of ad nauseum, but just in case there are people who don't know the transition away from Poker News itself and sort of also the inspiration to start some of these things on your own.
Well, I have to say that, first of all, Poker News gave me the job that I had always dreamed of. Like, it was if somebody would have told me in middle school that when you're 24, you're going to be traveling the world, reporting on a game that you love, interviewing people and making videos and producing them. And if someone told me that, I would have not believed them. So it was interesting that when I came to a moment where my dream job was suddenly not my dream job anymore. I loved it, but I just had a sense that I wanted to do something more or to grow. And I didn't really know what that meant. And this is something too that I want to share as we're moving into 2018 and moving out of 2017, that sometimes to go to the next thing or to move to the next step, you have to let go of things that are good, even really good, to risk and to get to the next dream or whatever it is. And so when I started having the inkling that I wanted to do something else, even though I didn't know what it was, what's beautiful about poker is that I had always wondered, could I really make it as a pro? Could I really play for a living? And poker has given so many people freedom and the time and money to pursue whatever their passions are. And so that's what I decided to do. I just followed my instinct into wanting to be curious about the things that I really liked. So I started playing poker for a living and really pursuing my curiosity full time outside of poker. And that led me to lots of different things. But what I most love is this area of like personal development. Just like, how do we learn about ourselves to create the biggest lives for ourselves, knowing that, I mean, we only got one of these things, you know?
I mean, amen.
And,
amen.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's really crazy? I'm just going to be super honest right now, is like, I'm like actually nervous, and I feel weird not being the one asking questions. And I haven't done this in a really long time. And it's just funny because like, it's just like you and me having a conversation, but like, what the heck? Is this what it feels like to be a poker player when we're interviewing them?
I think so. Even someone interviewed me last week for a podcast, and through I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sweating.
I'm sweating right now.
And also I noticed, you know, how there's so many people use all these non sequiturs and they don't notice it until they listen. When you're the interviewer, you hear it and you know better. But in the middle of my interview too, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going, oh. It's easy to do. And I'm really sorry that the lighting sucks, you guys. My Logitech camera settings are not opening. And so this is just the light from God.
Natural sunlight.
Yeah. And it's like an explosion. The other thing I can do is FaceTime camera, and then you guys will have to look at like two chins, but we can see if that works. But in the interim, so I really want to get into, you know, we only do like 30 to 45 minutes of interview stuff, so I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get into some of the things that you've been learning, some of the guests you've been having, some of the, it really runs the gamut. WTF Am I Doing with My Life talks to a lot of really incredible people, and I really want to try to glean as many little pieces as we can from that stuff. But starting your own podcast in something that is also outside of poker itself, while simultaneously, you know, pursuing professional poker, I think could sometimes make someone feel a little bit divided, or, you know, really first starting to pursue this professional poker thing. You also decided to make sure that you were pursuing something else. So I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about that decision and how you divide your, you know, your sort of like motivation and your time between these two projects, or do you see them as sort of one and the same?
Yeah, that's a really great question that I struggled with in the beginning. At first, I was thinking like, oh, I want to create this image of myself as an expert in this other area of personal development, spiritual growth, and emotional intelligence. So maybe I just need to reinvent myself and let that poker side go. And so that I'm known as an expert in this area alone. And it started to feel wrong, like divided, like you said. And I think so often we can try to compartmentalize our lives in some way, or say, like when you break up with somebody, you're like, oh, that was just like 5 years of my life wasted. Or if you're in a job that you don't particularly like and it's not your passion, you're like, oh, I'm just wasting away at this stupid desk job and Sally keeps stealing my stapler and it sucks. When really, if you look at life in a more holistic way, like what I realized was that my gift in coaching, my gift for seeing people and reading people, my ability to take risks, all have been honed and come from my decade of interviewing people and playing poker and assessing risk and learning about people and being inquisitive and knowing that I don't have all the answers. And that gives me my edge as a coach and what I'm doing now. And so I was like, why would I separate that part of my life? And so if we can look at our past in a way, or even our present as we're moving towards something, knowing that everything is an opportunity to be a teacher, then it just gives us like so much more strength, so much more passion and skill. And everything changed when I just embraced this part of myself in my messaging, which is like, though the title of the podcast is WTF Am I Doing with My Life? It's just this question that we get to ask ourselves whenever we feel like we're off the path of where we really want to be. We like look around, you're like eating Cheetos on the couch, watching Netflix for 10 hours. You're like, oh, what am I doing with my life? Maybe it's like a question that really gives you the opportunity to take a look and shift the trajectory of your life if you choose. But the key to moving forward is taking risks every day, doing something that's uncomfortable every day. And poker and risk assessment is all of that. So really integrating all of that, and that's been huge in not only how people communicate with me, but just like owning it. It just feels good to have it all be together. So like I created a hashtag risk every day, and anytime someone is taking a risk in their life and showing others and inspiring others to do the same, whether that's having a hard conversation or writing a first chapter to your book or stepping up in stakes and taking a shot or hiring a coach, that's a risk. I just love people to share that, because it's always showing other people how to do it, and that it's okay. So yeah.
I know for me, one of the things that really, you've always been a perfectionist. You've always been someone who's, I think setting goals and trying to reach them and maintaining your image. And I think a lot of poker players also, regardless of all the craziness that's at Twitter, and a lot of people are working really hard to sort of control their image and to structure the way that people see them. And I think it's really hard to get better at anything if you can't be really honest with both yourself and with other people about where you're at and what you're doing. So that's something that's been really great to see you evolve in that and to share that journey, to let people see it. Now, one of the things that you're getting me to get, and anyone who's listening to your show, is that you have this really vast array of experts who you're talking to. And so I wanted to touch on some of these that seemed both interesting to me and also sort of that could relate either to everyone or to poker players specifically. So you mentioned, sitting on the couch and just eating the Cheetos and doing the Netflix. And I think a lot of people have with fitness and weight loss and these type of things in our industry, and really just especially in this country as a whole. And so you just had someone on who was doing a podcast with you about emotional eating. And I wanted to, what are some tips? What did you learn from this?
I love you, and I love the way you ask questions. And I personally learned a lot from that podcast, because one of the ideas that she shared was that, holy crap, to be healthy, you don't have to be on a diet. Like my whole life, I think for a lot of people, it's like to eat healthy means you have to adopt some sort of specific and strict way of living and eating. And often that can lead to mindless eating or emotional eating, or what a lot of people call that. And what I understood her, because her name's Marissa Molina, she's a really great health coach, and I just love her approach, which is that healthy eating should be a lifestyle. It can be a lifestyle, one not of restriction, but one of total and complete joy, basically. And when it becomes restrictive, like you say to yourself, I cannot have carbs ever, or I cannot have cheese, then you're going to start feeling this depletion of joy and food, which then builds on each other. And then all of a sudden you're sitting on the couch and you've blacked out because the entire chocolate cake that you bought is gone, even though you promised yourself you're only going to have one piece. But it's like, I haven't had this in so long, and if I've already started, I'll I'll never be able to do this again because I restrict I just say I can't do that. And so I might as well, since I already ate 2 pieces, I might as well eat 5. So, and besides, I'll start again tomorrow. So might as well get it all in now. So tips are basically journal about what you eat and how you feel. And what you'll notice is you'll create distinctions of like how you really truly feel before and after you eat something. Because sometimes we just like block that out. And once we are really understanding, like if I eat a bunch of cake, I'm not that much happier. I'm actually not happy at all because I feel guilty and bloated and tired and gross. But actually, if I eat 1 or 2 pieces, I actually feel really good and soothed, and like I quenched my desire for sugar. And also I feel good about having only taken a couple bites. You know, it's not like 2 pieces of cake are like, if it's 10 times bigger, it's not 10 times as satisfying. So
I think this really correlates to poker. And it's interesting because it's one of the things that I was reading about. I just finished that book, The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis, which I super recommend, looking at some of the psychological work of Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. And one of the things that they talk about is loss aversion. And I think it completely correlates to poker and everything. So like what you're talking about, for example, saying, well, once you eat 1 piece, you're like, well, I totally messed up everything, so I might as well just eat it all. And I think it's a very similar thing with, also with poker, where it's like, oh, well, I only have 5 chips because I just lost them in that big hand, so I might as well just like spew them all in and forget about it. Do you find that sort of this idea can completely translate also into improving your poker game?
Yes, definitely. And yeah, like I've heard so many times at the poker table someone say, well, I'm not leaving until either this is gone or I like make back my money. And it's like that's the same kind of mind space, which is just that like, well, I've already lost so much, I might as well lose this last $800. And you're like, well, it's like still $800, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to be like, yeah, like, oh, what can you do?
I think
tough
I
choice.
agree with you.
Yeah. Which is funny because you, at the beginning of this interview, you asked me about this like diversion of like relationship coach and this person. But as a poker player, this is actually where it becomes divisive, is when I'm sitting down and I like really want to coach this guy, like, hey, that's really $800. But in game, I'm like, I'm a poker player right now in this role, and I want to take your money. So I'm like, oh yeah, like, what can you do? Might as well just gamble it up, you know?
Shots for everyone.
Yeah, no big deal. Even though my coach is saying to me, like, you know, what are you afraid of? Or, you know?
Yes. And I think there's so many things about, and actually I think as a whole, the poker community is really embracing this idea of emotional intelligence and also physical, all of the things, and how sort of being a more whole person, it makes you a better poker player. And we're really seeing that in action now. I think a lot of the top players are that, yes, this does work. And yes, it does improve your game. Now there's something else that you recently posted that you said the idea of investment in loss, giving up your current need to be right or win, will do 2 things. 1, speed up improvement and learning, and 2, allow you to actually enjoy the effing journey. So I wanted to can you explain to us the concept of investment in loss and also just how you're applying this to your own life?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting how we tend to want to be sure about things before we jump in or try it. And it's this need for certainty that often holds us back so much. Like, I'm not going to jump to the next stake until I'm sure I can beat it. Or I'm not going to ask this girl out on a date until I'm positive she's going to say yes. And that's actually one of the biggest, most wonderful things about poker, that if we can embrace in every part of our life, that it will greatly improve our even approach to this investment in loss, which is that we are always making, almost always, I mean, there's some universal truths, but we're almost always making decisions based on imperfect information. Every single decision in poker is based on imperfect information, right? Because we don't know the other person's cards. And so in that, there's an element of risk, there's an element of luck, and no matter how much you put your odds in your favor, there's always going to be some results that are ones that are not favorable, like that we don't really want. And knowing that losing is a part of the game, such is the same for life. And the quicker that you are willing to lose, the quicker that you're willing to make mistakes, the faster you'll learn. And it's like, I'm trying to think of, it was just this example in a book I read, but like basically the faster that you can find your faults and those things, the faster that you can improve on them. And then once that you do that and embrace that, I mean, how much more fun is the journey? Every time you make a mistake, you're like, yes, this is my leak. Like, finally, this guy keeps 3-betting me and I have no idea what to do because I keep 3-betting with these hands. And yes, like once I figure out the proper range to continue, this is awesome. Even though I just lost like $4,000 to this a-hole over here. You know, like how much more enjoyable is that journey?
And I mean, I'm fully 100% with you. And one of the homies in the chat has a question for you, which I think actually really ties in. I can't even see because you guys, I took off my giant screen. So, but base something, be something. He wanted you to talk a little bit about your the getting scammed and what are some tips you can give for. I'm more looking at this in the perspective of like sometimes you're gonna lose, but it's a big lesson. You know, sometimes you jump, you leap, you make a risk, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but that's also a lesson. I actually just recently got scammed too.
You did?
I was talking to Lingo Martin at brunch. Yeah, she was talking about a scam that she had, and it's interesting because looking back, I realized that there were some things, there were some little, you know, head that were like, oh, that seems a little weird. Like, hey, this isn't making sense, but that overrode those with like, you know, greed and fear, I think, which motivate people obviously. But I think I was being greedy. And even though the voice was like, this doesn't make sense, I was like, I'll just get this off my plate. But anyway, to talk, I think a lot of people, especially in this internet age, you know, we've got this crypto world, we've got, you know, this poker, like transferring money, all this stuff. I think a lot of people are having these. So if you could talk a little bit about what you see as some of the signs and things that we need to be listening to in order to avoid finding ourselves in these situations.
Yes. And what you just said is so just really, it's just like so important, which is that we tend to live so much in our heads that we don't really fully integrate all the knowledge. Like we think we know things because of our brains, but when really we know things based on our full experience. And it takes practice to tune in to which parts of ourselves we're like, no, don't listen, and which parts of ourselves are like, yeah, I want to get this done and over with, or yeah, maybe I can be a millionaire, even though like whatever these signs are. Like for example, in the where I got scammed, and scammed is that's a pretty forward word, and I can't really like prove it, but I mean, I can't, well, whatever. So there were so many things that where my gut was like, no, this is not right. So one is, if you ever have a gut feeling, just be curious. It's okay to be curious about it and to slow down, especially if it's a big decision and especially when it comes to parting with money. But this is tricky because some people are just naturally mistrusting, and then there's like this like balance of like you don't want to like just tuning into, is it coming from here or coming from your gut? And at least in the scam or the deal that happened with me, what you want to look for when you decide to work with somebody or invest your time in anything with someone else is, first of all, does that person keep their word? And this means in all the small ways. If he says he's going to call you at 10 p.m. or whatever, and then he doesn't, or 10 a.m. and doesn't call until noon, and he's like, oh, I took a nap, or it doesn't even acknowledge like, I said I would do something and I didn't, that's a major, major warning sign that they don't keep their word, like, because that's a lack of integrity, which falls into all parts of life and business. And it's just like, that's a huge warning sign. The other warning sign is, or the other thing to look for is, how do people handle pressure? It's really easy to be the best part of yourself when you're winning, and you see it at the poker table, like, oh, they got chirping chips. They're like, everybody's friend, shots for everybody. Like, we're so happy. And then they get unlucky and lose a pot, and then their wife calls and they're like, yeah, whatever, I'll fucking be home, effing be home soon. Sorry, I just said that word, but
it's rated R. Not a kid-friendly show.
Yeah, and like, do they have humility and resilience? And so if you don't know those things, take the time to find out how they handle pressure. Those are huge things. And also, really, it matters if someone that you trust can vouch for them. I think that we are all speaking volumes about ourselves with the people who we surround ourselves with. And it's just really easy to get a gauge about somebody from someone else that you trust. If you can't find anybody, then there's probably a reason.
Dude, I've never heard the term chirpin' chips, and I feel like I'm going to use that, and also I am that.
I feel like maybe you always have chirpin' chips.
Yeah,
like, if
like
you have
that's my style.
Yeah.
If there are
Totally.
chips, you will find me chirping. Well, we don't have too much more time, and there's so many things I want to cover, so I just want to jump right in. You wrote this really powerful. Well, let's get real. Most of your blogs are very powerful and very emotionally sort of raw and honest. And you wrote one recently about a trip that you made to a woman's retreat where you had sort of an eye-opening moment. And I feel like no matter where people are in their lives or their poker or anything, these type of wake-up moments are important for us all to recognize and get back to. So first of all, if you guys didn't, you definitely want to check out, it's KristyArnett.com. Check out the blog. But in the meantime, if you can kind of tell the listeners about that experience.
I am actually not sure which one you're talking about. I guess I just spill my guts all the time, but
it's you basically maybe almost drove into a semi truck.
Oh, right. So
no big deal.
What I believe is that life is always giving us feedback in some way. And poker does that as well. And in that particular case, I had set up my life in a way where I said yes to staffing this women's retreat. And I had so many things on my to-do list, which I always do. And I put them and stack them and act like they are all immediate emergencies that need to happen. Otherwise, the world is going to end. So I set up my life in a way where I left at 4 a.m. to drive for I left at I was getting there at 4 a.m. and I almost fell asleep at the wheel. And I just really had this moment of Kristy, you just almost drove in front of a semi because of the way that you set up your life. And I could have just left that moment thinking, man, whatever, that was just an unlucky thing. I need to make sure I sleep before, or I need to pull over when I'm tired. Which I think so many things in life we can do. My girlfriend's just crazy. Even though, my last 2 girlfriends were crazy. Or life is always giving us feedback. And what that feedback was to me was the way I had been setting up my life, all this busyness wasn't working. Pushing myself that hard wasn't working. And they have real consequences. And it's just irresponsible. And so I think I would just really encourage anybody with poker, with life, with relationships, what are the results in your life trying to tell you?
Dude, that's so true. And I love always saying this to people, you're the only common denominator. This keeps happening to you, but it's everyone else's crazy really crazy. Like,
Totally. Exactly
okay, I want to touch on one more thing too. Mostly, especially also because I know that the Steinbergs are bosses, and people in the poker world will know the Steinbergs. But actually, there's a Steinberg that you may or may not know, Amanda Steinberg, whom I actually didn't get to listen to this podcast yet. And what basically you had said from Amanda was, you are worth creating terms with your money. So I wanted to have you, especially, I think, for all of us, financial stuff is difficult, and we're always trying to figure out how to better manage our bankrolls, how to better manage our lives, and those risks, and find those opportunities, but not get scammed. And there's so many things. So what are the things that you learned from Amanda that you think that we could all maybe implement into our own lives?
Well, one of the biggest lessons that she taught me, especially with that quote that you just said, is that often with money, we can create these stories that our financial situation is somehow outside of ourselves. It's because our boss won't pay us more, or because the economy is down right now, so that's why I'm not making a lot of money, or it's just my profession. Teachers just don't make money, that may be true. But our financial stability, how we live our lives, what we decide is true for ourselves, we are the only people who can change it. And once we take full 100% responsibility for the financial situation in our lives, knowing that no matter what story you have, the economy, your profession, your boss, someone will have the same story with even more circumstances and somehow make it work, right? Like the old saying, not old saying, but like the saying, like Beyonce has the same 24 hours in a day. Like there are so many possibilities, but you'll be open to none of them unless you can really say and shift to, it's up to me to figure this out. It's up to me to create a side hustle. It's up to me to powerfully request a raise or get another job or whatever it is, or to save money or to learn about money or to invest it wisely. And that's where it really starts. And it's really interesting how money and sex, like these, or religion, these are these like really like gripping areas of our life that we all have differing and really concrete views on, that we almost like stranglehold. And it's like money is one of those things. And it's just so interesting how we all have different beliefs about money and how significantly they dictate our success. Like one thing, just I'll share really quickly, that she shared with me that I think is so just like mind-blowing, is like, have you ever looked at a super, super rich person and thought to yourself, ugh, they must be doing something scammy, or like, how the hell do they have that much money? Or they must be like snotty or something.
And I'm always like, they're totally stealing. And they probably have a trust fund.
Chirping money.
Chirping money. Yeah. Or like they don't really care about people probably, or something like that. Like I've had those thoughts.
Or like, I always think they didn't work for it. I'm like, oh, they were probably rich to begin with.
Oh yeah. See, like I have a very different belief that they're just like, they probably like only work, or like their lives.
They're really unhappy.
Yes, exactly. And it's in those beliefs that like unless we really address those, we will never be those people with that much money, because inherently we believe, or somewhere not, deep down inside, we make those people bad. And if we don't want to be those bad people, we're not going to create our lives in a way where we'll ever make that much money. And that's just how the things like the iceberg analogy, all the things under the iceberg, we don't really realize are running our lives, but which is obviously, I don't know, I thought that was so interesting. Like, oh yeah, like I totally do that. And I see how I have I had a very limited view of what I could ever see myself making in terms of abundance and prosperity and money.
You just said Beyonce has the same 24 hours, and I was just like, fuck Beyonce. So like, which is gonna piss off a lot of people, but I can just think like, you're right. So I'm sure, like, I'm just like a millennial. I'm like, it's everyone else's fault why I'm not super rich.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that same thing, right? Where it's like, you're the only common denominator. Like, it's not Beyonce's fault you're not rich.
Well, you know, I mean, it's just like, it's a lot of things, and there are circumstances and there are things, but it's just like, how can we learn and open up about these things that have us, I don't know. I mean, just like, just open up the possibilities. I can't believe you said fuck Beyonce. That's fucked up.
I know, dude. Like, I'm gonna get so much hate. I'm about to be like, she's gonna send out a squad. It's over. Okay. So this is basically the part of the show where we have to kind of wind things down a little bit, but it's been super fun. I feel like the more I do these live ones, the more I want to make them longer, and also maybe like put on some makeup sometimes, or I don't know, whatever. We'll have to see. But I know, it's like every time I see you, every time we hang out, you're always changing, you're always growing, you're always evolving. I feel like I always learn something when I'm with you, and I have no doubt that what your future holds is going to be awesome. But for those who don't, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your 2018? Are you getting that book out yet, or what? I'm trying to get that book.
Yes, I am. And it is for anybody who wants clarity and purpose. Like, I just feel like, I mean, we talk a little bit about millennials, but I think for most of us, we all do really have these moments of like, what am I doing with my life? What should I be doing with my life? What do I want to do with my life? And the book is really just going to be a guide for how we create clarity, what's actually important to us, and how to create our lives in a way that we are embracing risk. Like, everybody wants to be able to say what they really feel. They want to be with people who really resonate with them. They want to like see how good they can be at whatever their given job or passion is. And everybody wants love. Everybody. And it's really just going to be how to create that through taking risks. And that will be probably in the beginning of the year. But what I'm really excited about is creating a tour for the book, and having a workshop, and having people come and hang out, and have just really transformative experiences where they walk out not only learning something about themselves, but knowing exactly what their next step is going to be, right? Like, walking out ready to make some huge splash in their lives. So that's what I'm really excited about.
I'm ready to become Beyonce. Let's do it. So for people who want to find you, where are all of the places they should go?
If they want to find me, they can just go to KristyArnett.com, KristyArnett.com, and all the links are there. And also the WTF Am I Doing with My Life is where all the any place you can find a podcast, it should be.
WTF Am I Doing with My Life? Everyone listen, follow Kristy on Twitter, and it's at Kristy Arnett finally, right? It's legit at Kristy Arnett. And
it's at
Arnett. We've made a huge transition. I'm going to have to transition away from anti-Chardonnay, because someday I'm going to have to join a 12-step program and quit drinking. And then what will all this marketing have been for? I don't know. But thank you guys so much for those who did join us and who had stuff to say in the chat and what have you. I really appreciate it. Because you're the best, and it was so good to have you on the show. And
I want you on my podcast soon, by the way.
Oh yeah, I have so much insights. I can tell them all about that podcast will be called Fuck Beyonce. It'll probably get really good SEO.
Yeah, totally.
For Sarah Herring.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I love you guys. I wish you, Kristy, Merry Christmas, and we're gonna shoot the rest of this podcast. Bye.
Love you. Bye.